So then, we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the Word. And this translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read in Yeshayahu the prophet, we always make a reference of this prophet because via his scripture that was obviously inspired, we can understand then the flow of events from the time of Yeshayahu the prophet, based or having then a structure from the Torah, very important, and then later on you find these prophecies taking place once, and then the reflection taking place once again during our time. As we read then also Daniel the prophet, let's then make an evaluation what's going on in the world as far as guidance from heaven of what the nations then should be doing. Firstly then, you find the reason why Israel should be then in tune with the holy instructions. It's because they should be leading the nations. Now let's be frank regarding this situation. Is Israel leading the nations? No. Israel is not leading the nations, unfortunately, because they are on the defense mode every time. So then, as far as we can understand it from this factor, let's then compensate the situation by understanding why they are doing what they are doing. We know that Israel was persecuted for many years, and it is also important we make then and establish a distinction from being a defense mode versus then becoming leader of nations. The last developments, as we understand, it came out in the international newspaper. You've read then very precisely that Israel then decided to bombard areas near Damascus, near the border. And they shouldn't have done this, because it is truly against international laws. Now the question is, why then Israel is going above and beyond their state of defense mode? It's very interesting because Israel claims that they're always under the problem of being destroyed. On the other hand, they go beyond their means and they go and then bombard areas near Syria. So, because of these, we can simply understand also from the holy instructions that Israel is not being guided by a divine nature, but rather they are absolutely doing things on their own. It's true, we should obviously read the holy instructions and the Torah and the prophets, and we should glean from these understandings directives for the nations. It is true. But when people sometimes they do not have the proper knowledge, they tend of having a place or a group of people who are representing God in the earth, yet they are doing what they should not be doing. So then, let's say, where should we then search for the real truth besides Israel? Now it's very simple. We find in our holy instructions. So then, let's make an evaluation as far as Daniel the prophet. You find sections of the 12th chapter. You find sections of Galah, the 20th chapter of Revelation. And you find then the 1,000 years of the Savior was then already granted. Directives was given for 1,000 years. Then you find the holy cities were no more. In 1009 the Muslims destroyed the last holy cities that were then around, and they destroyed also Jerusalem and the tomb from where the Savior came from. Then started the new world order, because there was no directives from the holy cities. Thus was so for 1,000 years and ended in 2009. From then on, The system of monetary values has changed. Many kinds of virtual monetary systems has come up. And then, where the Creator is at amongst this entire situation? Now, we should read His holy instructions. But where do we find then evidence that Israel is not on the right path? Well, let's make an evaluation. What has Daniel said? He said for 1,000 years then the people would be roaming the earth. What does it mean? The cities were no more, and then when the New World Order came, roughly in 1009, then the people of Israel were roaming the earth because the cities were no more. Yet, because of this time of roaming, Israel has yet the idea there will be a third temple. But then let's make sure we understand and make sure we don't distort the situation, because there won't be a third temple. Israel, in their prayers, they include the building of the third temple as if the Creator Himself would come down from heaven and refurbish this earth on the terms of Israel of this age. And truly it is lunacy. The world is not going to be changed because Israel got in the flesh and decided to do what they want to do versus what we should be searching for in our holy instructions. There won't be a third temple on Mount Moriah. It may have a building someplace else where then they claim to be the third temple, but it's not relevant. Where do we find this information very precisely? You find these because when we read Daniel, the 11th chapter, the first mentioning of the covenant of Israel without the proper understanding of the holy instruction is deceit. Let's evaluate where it's coming from. Then we find very precisely a couple of situations regarding in the 23rd chapter of the 11th chapter of Daniel. Let's read then. And they will be broken, and a ruler of the covenant, after joining themselves with him, shall practice deceit. Is this covenant is then the second tabernacle services? No, it is the first tabernacle service. That's what Israel is wishing for, and that's what they want. They want the third temple, but this is false. It is false wishing. There won't be a third temple. The Messiah himself has said, not a stone is going to be left upon another. Because the temple was not in order given by the Creator himself. It was a gift that was coming from man, and the man was David. There won't be a third temple because it's not part of the holy instructions. At some point in time, the sons of Ishmael will let only the tent used in a desert to be set up. That's what it is, because it's from the instructions. Now, what can we then understand after knowing the truth? Obviously, people who are endowed with understanding should help Israel becoming more acquainted with the real truth versus what they're wishing for. Okay, this is the first section. The second section is a relation with the Soviet Union and the new system, because the system is going worldwide. Speaking of Israel is a situation, as far as the rest of the world is another situation. Where do we read then the holy instructions as far as Daniel explaining then the increase of knowledge. The 12th chapter. You find then, and at the end of the roaming time, of the end of the 1,000 years of deceit, knowledge shall increase for the purposes of trade. It is true the other knowledges are yet present, but what we are speaking of is then what Daniel was doing, and what the nations are rounding themselves up in order to achieve a goal. When we read then once again from the 11th chapter of Daniel, then you find the reorganization of the nations as per the time where then Asia Minor used to lead the world's trade. Isn't that interesting? At some point you have then the Apostle Paul or then Shaliach Shaul teaching these situations to those Hebrews that were then in Asia Minor, and they've learned from the Hebrews how to do trade, how to be trustworthy, how to do trade cleanly. And the world then is returning to what it used to be. Now, until we reach this point, many skirmishes are coming up. Many. Because the 11th chapter of Daniel is repleted with many kinds of skirmishes and fights and combat. Let's read then a section of it, because then we can understand the very strong skirmish that must take place from United States and the Soviet Union. It is back, liking it or not liking it. And it is a major factor then later on when the United States joins with Israel. But these we should have then an understanding from the time it takes place, as far as the Soviet Union helping then Egypt becoming the most powerful country in the area. As the first objective, you can read very precisely Daniel 11:8. Understandably, we are reading a reflection of a situation that already has taken place in the past. Then we have to understand Hebrews. And then the Torah is the shadow or reflections of the future events. So that's how we read the Holy Instruction. There is a projection of what's already taking place versus then what's going on in our place as the restoration period. So no person can tamper with the events because they are already taking place by themselves and tested, and then we are reviving them as per the same events. However, changes the place. And we understand this topic. Now, how is it going to be, this relationship of the United States and the Soviet Union? Spies everywhere. In these, why then we should understand it at this point? Because the percentages of what governments must deduct as taxes, those are yet not set on paper. Thus then, many kinds of skirmishes are coming up very strongly. And because of these, many nations who are then involved with the monetary systems of this world, they are going to get the best of it, or trying to get the best of it. However, they have an obstacle. They have to work with people's rights of usage of computers. And as we understand these days, if you want to be part of someone's computer, there are many kinds of rights and obstacles where you have to have both parties very acquainted with the situations, so then both can become partners. And in order for governments, they are already not trustworthy, and becoming partners with users of computers, it is truly a nightmare of paperwork. And that's where then the skirmishes are coming from. So when we read the many skirmishes on the 11th chapter of Daniel, and some of this relationship that goes on, there are a couple of situations. One of them is understanding then the supremacy of the Arab world, because they are the sons of the first son of Abraham, or Ibrahim. And they are gathering in Egypt, because that's where Hagar came from. The Holy Instructions are saying to us that the standing up of Egypt comes from the Northern Kingdom. Now, we already identified the Northern Kingdom is the Soviet Union. As the Soviets then, they prepare Egypt, and Egypt then becomes the most powerful country of the area. Then we understand the sons of Ishmael, then they have the supremacy. As far as their side of the deal then is reached, then you find they are going towards the south, where then at the very moment we then understand tabernacling. Prior of these and during this time, you find then at our time, we understand Egypt is not the most powerful place yet in northern Africa. The Soviet Union is lacking courage of doing more trade or even lending them the equipment, so then Egypt can become the independent, powerful country of northern Africa. So we are in the midst of yet Egypt becoming this powerful country. And the Holy Instructions are very clear. And Israel, however, is not even part of it. Israel is further later on. You find then when Israel makes its showings in the Holy Instructions is purely for deceit. Because Israel does not understand there won't be a third temple, and we must understand what the Messiah has done ever since he ascended. Now, should Israel be rejected? No, it's not the point. The point is, the promise of the Creator himself said, at certain time, then the veil, or then the rejection of Israel is going to be lifted from them. Because for a time, they were roaming the earth, as if some sort of a blind understanding that would blind their understandings and their minds for the real understanding of the truth. And at some point, this blinding factor is going to be removed. But we can't wait until this blind factor is removed from Israel, because the nations, they must receive understandings and directives now. We can't wait for Israel to come to their senses and then later on work through so many centuries of wasting and then giving directives. No, we must give directives at this very moment. And that's where we find Daniel the 11th chapter and verse 8 and 9. Now, the relationship with United States and the Soviet Union, extremely important, because the Soviets at some point they're going to lead the world's protection as far as the new trade with China. At the moment, there is a huge fight with the East and the West. The West is trying to then come up with some sort of a new way of trying to fix what was then the older ways that never worked in the first place. You have then the East that already worked in the first place, and then they were kind of on a side for some time, and they are making a comeback in a form that it's already working. So then when you evaluate both of them, obviously you wanted to do what the Easterners are doing. Because when you invest in the system of China, you get the most return. And then the West is skirmishing themselves. They are in debt, they are bankrupt, and they don't understand the new system. However, we do understand, because we read the Holy Instructions, But then until we make the proper transition to the Easterner ways, then these skirmishes are playing very strongly. So then, as far as the United States, later on we understand they are going to come out of this deal with great wealth. It's already explained very plainly. But prior of this time, what is it going to cost the United States to become this great and wealthy country? There is an exchange that takes place. The United States retrieves from the world's system as far as protecting this trade, or the trade system of the new trade system of China. In exchange, they understand the virtual system going on around the world. The USD, or the United States monetary system, is yet widely used because of what went on during the Second World War. But it's more than 70 years ago. But then because of the influence that the U.S. has, then these skirmishes going on from country to country, the nations are working their way through the many thousands and thousands of details in making a central bank of a country linked with the Chinese system. At this point in time, if you say this to any other country, it is somewhat vague, because they don't understand the intricacies of computerized systems where then they should have. So let's make an evaluation once again. Why is it going to cause situations with espionage in many other of these areas regarding fights amongst the nations? Where do we find the bulk coming from? Coming from detailing these specific percentages, specific taxes, specifics as far as taxing, for instance, transactions, and then taxing transfers. Each country should have their own table or their own charts of how much they want to glean from this new system as people then engage themselves in doing the new trade. Now, the situation is when countries, they hear these, they simply turn their backs and they don't want to hear it. The problem is they don't have a choice. The system is already implemented. And the point is, China is the leader of this new system, and China is not very interested if countries they know or if they do not know. Once they launch this system via computer, China has the best of it. And if the nations are not prepared of linking up with China, then they're going to be on their own. So then, I'm going to say this once again. If nations are not working on their behalf, on having their details as far as how they're going to be relating with the new system, it's going to be their problem. When China launches the new system, the whole world is going to be giving China the forward motion. And as people are buying from China, they want their products delivered at their homes. How the nations not prepared are going to realize the situation, they have to deal with it. Then comes another situation of benefits. Another situation is going to be taking place as far as how they are going to deliver these packages, and how they are going to become then involved with payments of people while they go to work using an outside monetary system. Can you understand the complexity of the situation? Now, there are systems in this world, they are closed circuit. Let's say, for instance, you have Great Britain, was a great country and is a great country, and they use the pound. In many places where they are linked they have to try to work out some sort of a plan so then the crown can remain yet active. When the new system of China becomes available, then each of these transactions must be then computed in the system, and then these transactions must reflect then what they want from the people as far as taxes. Now, if they use the pound, can they use pound to invest in the Chinese system? No, you have to convert. As they are doing transfers and paying their own people with foreign money. If a CEO of a company decides then, because the investments is so high and the returns are so profitable, they might decide to pay their own people with foreign money. How they are going to deduct the taxes due to the country. So then, going back to those skirmishes, then you find later on, after the 8th verse of the 11th chapter, you find then Egypt very strong. In fact, you don't hear any more of Egypt from the 8th chapter, the 8th verse of the 11th chapter and beyond. Let's ask ourselves, why have we not heard of Egypt since? Because Egypt is very powerful. Egypt is the very headquarters of the sons of Ishmael. The entire Arab nations are then focused upon Egypt. Not saying that Egypt is becoming then the new place of religion, it's not the point. But because they understand where they came from, they realize Egypt is the place where then Hagar, the mother of the entire Arab nations, came from. In a nice way, because we understand they came from Ibrahim. And this powerful Egypt is standing up from the kingdom of the north. Thus then, when the Soviet leader then goes to Egypt and arms them, paying or not, there was a deal in September where then Mr. Putin, Mr. Sisi, they visited. And there were a few there, 12 digits they worked on, but it's not enough. The Soviet Union must arm then Egypt to its absolutely top maximum. And then ISIL, those people from the sons of Ishmael, the ISIL must be then gathered in Egypt, and they must come up with a plan, so then they are engaged in doing trade with the nations. At some point in time, it must be joined with the rest of the world's trade. Because the sons of Ishmael, they already have a huge advantage. They have oil. And a friend of mine told me today some information I have not yet verified in the system, that the Arabs are lowering even more the price of oil until 2030. I have not checked this information yet. But there are many talks going on, because people are realizing then the sons of Ishmael are becoming managers because of the oil they can control. And they control the oil because they are forcing the nations to work. Governments are lazy by nature. These people, they don't care if the nation is doing fine or not. Watching, for instance, Brazil is an absolutely bankrupt country because politicians, they steal so much. It is beyond understanding, incomprehensible. They steal, they cheat, they falsify, they do whatsoever they can to steal and to get more from the government. And the government is bankrupt. The investments on the pre-salt layer, as far as the exploration of petroleum, it's not worth ship's biscuit. And then people, where are we going from this? We already understand the Soviet leader must arm Egypt. And the rest of the nations are waiting then for Jack May. He is the leader of the new Chinese system. And then linking up the rest of the world. And it won't help if we then have a negative perspective of the situation. But in the next 36 months, lots of situations must take place. By the end of 36 months, we should at least hear of the leader of the new system starting linking up the rest of the world. We should have news as far as the Soviet Union arming Egypt. At least these couple of situations. And obviously when the new system then is launched from then on, as far as the third level or the third step of investment also coming up. So then, reading from the Holy Instructions is very important, as you can understand. But then spying of the nations, it is very high. Because the influence that some countries they have upon others is much stronger now at this moment, while they don't have yet set up the percentages and taxes. And those nations who do not understand and turn their backs from it, they're going to have a big surprise in the future, because they are obliged and obligated to deliver the packages. Later on, I'm going to study more of the covenant, and then understandably we should explain more as far as the relations with their countries, as far as Kingdom of the North, East and South, and then the nations of Africa involved with it. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.